All right, now we're at the Ask the Experts panel, and not missing somebody here. So we have a Q&A with Doug Tallamy and local native plant experts, Glen Schneider, Bob Sorenson, and Kelly Marshall. This is about 25 minutes long. And let me introduce Glen. Glen is a super early adopter of local native plants. His own garden in Berkeley has been on the tour almost every year since the tour's inception in 2005. Glen is also the founder of the amazing Skyline Gardens Alliance Restoration Project. Next, I'd like to introduce Bob Sorenson, whose Arinda Garden has been on the tour a number of times. And in fact, we'll be visiting Bob's spectacular garden immediately after this talk. Bob is also an active volunteer with the Skylines Gardens Restoration Project. And next, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Kelly Marshall, owner of Kelly Marshall Garden Design. When she is not busy designing beautiful native plant gardens, Kelly and I spent many years running sheet mulching workshops together. And you could let us know in Zoom or YouTube chat boxes if you have met Kelly during one of our sheet mulching workshops, or if Kelly has designed your own garden. And you can see Kelly's own home garden on the tour next Sunday morning. So we're going to take some questions now, and I'm going to be sorry if we don't get to your question. We're going to try and do the best we can here for the next about 25 minutes or so. So I'd like to start by asking the panel, what would you suggest that people can do tomorrow in their own gardens to help improve ecological health? And I'm just going to work my way across the screen. Dr. Tallamy, why don't we start with you?
You know, for most people, I start with that lawn. Look at the area you have in lawn and think how you can reduce it. It should be, and you should have lawn where you walk. And if it's particularly dry, maybe not even that, just have pebbles or something. But it should be an area rug, not wall-to-wall carpeting. That's what Thomas Rainer says. So adding a tree, adding a bush, that would be the first step. A lot of people say, well, I'm going to rip out everything and just go crazy. I would caution against that. Just one at a time. Having a design helps, but don't let that slow you down. Just start adding things. Make it a hobby and a goal that is long-term. And that way you're not overwhelmed.
Okay, good. Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, so if you have an area of your yard that is not, landscaped, it's a little on the wild side, one easy thing to do is to go pick out 2 or 3 of the really nasty exotics that are there, hemlock or ripgut brome or one of those, and just start pulling those out and start learning some of the exotic plants that can come out.
Okay, good. Thank you. Let's see, Kelly?
Well, I would agree. I assume the lawn's going to go. After working with the rebate project for so many years and with natives for so many years, unless you've got kids, small kids that still use a lawn, you don't need a lawn. Dogs don't care if you have lawn. My dog has never had a lawn and she still pees and poops in the mulch, no problem, every day. I think in California, it's really hard to have a good looking lawn without a ton of water and without a ton of chemicals. So a lot of times I think people hold on to lawn because they don't know what else to do. They're paralyzed with the thought of changing it, but let it go. And then you've got all kinds of new space to put in habitat.
Okay, and do we have Glen with us now? I don't think that we do. So I think I'll ask a couple questions of, maybe he's, okay. So while we're trying to see if we have Glen, so Bob and Kelly, why don't I ask you, so what are your local favorite keystone plants for sunny areas for a home garden?
You want me to go first?
Sure, Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, I'd say both our Arctostaphylos species, manzanita, and our ceanothus species, California lilac, because they come in so many different sizes and varieties, and there's something that fits in every person's garden, whether you've got 50 square feet or 5,000 square feet to work with. I can get a manzanita or a ceanothus in there that'll work for you. And the good thing about those is that they bloom in not the height of the season. They are winter and early spring bloomers. So you get a little bit of successive blooms rather than that big show that we have, April, May, June.
All right.
It's not me.
It's not me.
Me either. Bob, how about your local favorite sunny keystone species?
Yeah, so the oaks are really nice. And then the other ones that are nicer, the sages do really, really well in the chaparral areas. Black sage is a nice one for the Contra Costa region. And yeah, those are some good ones. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I know, Dr. Tallamy, you've just published a book on oaks. So maybe all three of you could respond to what about people who have fairly small lots? Are there good oaks for relatively small areas? Maybe, Doug, can we start with you and then we'll work over to Bob and then Kelly.
You know, I've got an entire list. It's a whole page long of oaks that are small trees, shrubs, or ground covers that occur in the West. I don't have them memorized, but I do know that they occur, and you do have small oak options. And one of them was mentioned. I wrote it down here.
Yeah, it's the leather oak, Doug.
The leather oak, yeah, perfect example. So the idea that all oaks are massive, it's not correct. And this is an issue across the country because a lot of people do not want a large tree, but there are small oaks. And in the West, you're lucky because you've got many more options than we have in the East.
Okay, good. Thank you. Maybe you could send me your list of oaks. I would put it up if you have oaks for the West. I'll put it up on my resource
Okay.
page.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay, so Bob, did you have any other suggestions? Or Kelly? Bob, we'll start with you. Bob, do you have anything else for small oaks or the prunus family?
Yeah, the holly cherry is a nice plant. The other plant I think is underappreciated is the coyote bush, Baccharis, which hosts 39 species of butterflies and moths. So that's a volunteer plant. It volunteers everywhere, and it's a beautiful plant, and I think should be considered a keystone plant. Yeah.
I love coyote brush. Kelly, do you have anything to say about oaks or other trees that are on the list of high keystone plants?
Well, I think that just like a lot of us suffer from zone denial, we try plants in areas that really don't grow in our, if we're too cold or we're too hot. I'm also a fan of trying to control space denial a little bit. So what I get the opposite. I get, well, it's not that big, but I'm sure I could get this great big tree in here and it's going to get really big, but it won't be my problem. And I think, but it'll be somebody's problem, and it's probably going to be the oak's problem. So, and if there are power lines in the way, or if there's really not that much space, I'm all for picking the right plant for the right space so that it's nobody's problem down the line. So it's rare that I have space in a garden for a big oak to go in. But I'm with you, Bob. I like coyote bush. There's a variety of that called centennial that doesn't get very big. I also like the prunus, the holly leaf cherry, if I can fit it in. If somebody needs a hedge line, a barrier or privacy screen, that's a good one if I've got the space to get that in there, because that's right at the top of the list.
Okay, there I am. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so here's Glen. Glen, nice to see you with us. And are you unmuted, Glen? Can we hear you? All right, well, Glen is getting settled. So Doug, we had some questions about carbon sequestration, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about native plants and carbon sequestration and lawn.
One of the things that surprises a lot of people, they think that plants are sequestering carbon in their tissues. And of course they are. Their plants are built out of carbon. And the bigger and older the plant is, the more carbon it's storing. But it's the carbon that they're pumping into the soil. And it's usually through mycorrhizal associations. They produce a product called glomalin, which is left behind. The glomalin is all carbon. And that turns out to be a more important contribution over long periods of time than the plant itself, because anything above the ground will eventually fall over and release the carbon again. But carbon that's in the soil can stay there many thousands of years. So any plant, all plants are pumping carbon into the soil. But the very worst plants are the ones with the shortest root, like your grass. So almost any other plant choice is going to do a better job at sequestering carbon. But don't think it's got to be a massive tree. Your small shrubs and perennials are putting carbon into the soil as well. It's the bare places that's not sequestering carbon.
Okay, so we can all help with controlling climate change at home just by our own plant choices in our yards.
Yes.
So this is another one for you, Doug. So someone asked, I've had seen 2 questions about caterpillar damage. So how to control caterpillars that damage your native plants. I had a coyote brush that came up from seed. It was very damaged by caterpillars. And someone else asked, well, if I have a native plant garden, what are my neighbors going to think about caterpillars damaging their garden?
Well, of course, caterpillars do eat plants, and we have to loosen up our expectations a little bit. Small holes in leaves are normal. That's what plants are doing. That's when they're passing on their energy. There's a woman in New Orleans, Tammany Baumgarten, who says we should all practice the 10-step program. If you take 10 steps back from your plants, all of your insect problems disappear, because you can't see that damage anymore. Now, occasionally there are outbreak species, and occasionally they'll eat quite a bit. Most of our native insects rarely kill a plant, and I mean rarely. It's the introduced insects, the no natural enemies, that get out of hand and cause the big problems. Remember, if you've got breeding birds in your yard, they're eating hundreds of caterpillars a day. And that's why people go out, I can't find my caterpillars. That's right, the birds have eaten them first. They get them first. So to actually have enough caterpillars to damage a plant is very unusual. I never see it at my house. I'm like everybody else. I'm happy when I find one. So I guess be a little bit more tolerant. Your plant is going to be okay. And if we can convince our neighbors that our plants are ecological entities, they're not just decorations, a little damage. If they don't have any damage, they're not doing their job. So it's something to celebrate, actually.
And the neighbors, unless they have native plant gardens, they're probably not going to be having damage anyway, would they? Because the caterpillars.
No, they're like plastic plants.
Right, right, it never looks damaged. So
Exactly.
Bob, why don't we go through the list, and we'll go from Bob and Kelly and then Glenn. I see you're with us now. So maybe you can talk about insects in your yard and what you see insects do, and what do you think about insects in your yard?
Yeah. So first of all, I just like to thank Doug Tallamy for that great talk. Everybody on the website right now, I'm sure, is a native plant enthusiast. But we're not scientists. And I just want to thank Doug for supplying the science behind what we all think is the right thing to do. So thank you, Doug.
You're welcome.
The other thing I want to mention is that, planting the natives in the yard, it changes. So, we're looking for the right plant for the right spot, but you often have to plant 10 plants and let them sort it out. And the native plants will sort it out on their own. And you have to kind of embrace change in your yard and enjoy the evolution of the yard over time.
Okay, Kelly, what do you think about insects in the yard and insect damage? Do you see it? What do you see? What do you think about?
I do see it, but to me, that's habitat. The good bugs follow the bad bugs, and they eat the bad bugs. So, milkweed always has those little golden aphids on it, always. But anything I do to try to control the aphids is possibly a detriment to the monarch eggs. And besides that, ladybugs are right behind, coming to eat those golden aphids. So what do? I tell the client, it's going to have aphids. Let's not sit it right next to the path where you have to brush against it every day. Let's put it out away from that area where the humans have to touch it. And you can go look at it and see if you see monarch caterpillars, but you don't, and you're just going to ignore the aphids. And that's the same for, California bee plant. The painted lady caterpillars eat that thing down to little nubbins in my garden. And then I had this amazing display of painted lady caterpillars hatch in my garden last spring. And then my bee plant put out all new leaves. That's what it's supposed to do. So that's part of it. I mean, overall, yes, the garden is for humans, but if you've got bugs, good or bad, you've got habitat. That's our goal.
Thank you. We'll have a talk also, I forget if it's the 16th or the 23rd, on aphids. And it's a presentation by Mei Chen. She's a fantastic self-taught entomologist, and she took fabulous photos of what happened with her milkweed plants. And it was really an education for me about the aphids on the milkweed. So Glenn, hello, nice to have you with us.
Hi.
So why don't you talk about insects in your gardens? Do you see insect damage? What do you think about insects in your own garden?
I love the insects. Damage really isn't a problem. You know, I grew up in the nursery business. I've been landscaping over a period of 50 years. The latter part of my career just with local native plants. And it's just not really a problem. I put this on the list of things to trouble the sleep of little children. Don't worry about it.
I know when I have seen in my own yard, like those half moon shaped bites that come out of the rose leaves, I'm thrilled because I know that it means I have bees in my yards that are using that plant. So I have not used any chemical sprays in my own yard for 30 years. I don't bother with my milkweeds. The aphids come and then the ladybugs come and the birds do. And later on I get milkweed beetles. And so for me, there's no damage in my yard. It's just interesting to see what happens. But since we have 3 local experts here, and since we have a big problems with weeds, even if we're trying to grow natives, maybe you could talk about Oxalis. You know, Oxalis, one of our big nemesis plants in the gardens, or that weedy grass, Earharta, like everybody knows that tall weedy grass that grows. So Glenn, since we just got you on, maybe you can help us think out how can people help control Oxalis in their yards?
Well, I've done an experiment in my parking strip in front of my house, and I've carefully hand weeded it every time there's a rosette big enough to handle. And I get that cord a couple inches deep. And it's taken 6 years to eradicate the Oxalis. So I would actually, this may be controversial, but the best and simplest way to do it is to spray it with Roundup. If you sheet mulch, you'll have to sheet mulch with a couple layers of cardboard and probably 6 inches deep, and you'll still have the Oxalis problem. So, I gave up using Roundup 30 years ago, but I think this is one place where, and I know this will be a little controversial, but it does the job and it'll save you years and years of labor.
Okay, Kelly?
I'm going to be around for years and years of labor. I don't use any chemicals ever. I have a hula hoe, which I bought on Amazon for $22. So I don't have to break my back bending over to pull weeds in my trouble spots. And if I've got a real trouble spot, I will pull the bark back and put down multiple layers of cardboard and remulch back over it. And then I just stay on it. I go out after, some people have a glass of wine after dinner. I go out and pull weeds for half an hour, and it's very relaxing, therapeutic. And I like seeing what else is happening in the garden. So no chemicals here.
Bob, in your video, I did not see Oxalis in your yard. How do you manage?
So I had a huge patch of Oxalis that I discovered about 20 years ago when I first learned about Oxalis. And I actually tried Roundup on it, and it didn't work. Maybe I didn't do it heavy enough. So I've been pulling it ever since, and I'm down to maybe 1% of the initial Oxalis after 10 to 15 years. But every year I go out and I pull it. One thing you can do, if you're pulling it, is to try to get the little corms at the bottom of the roots and just crush those with your fingers, because if those stay in the ground, they'll grow back next year a new plant.
So I want to say we sheet mulch our Oxalis with multiple layers of cardboard and thick piles of sheet mulch. And it actually worked pretty well. Like after a few years, the Oxalis comes up, but it's kind of frail and it's easy enough to get out. And, I have learned a few lessons from other garden tour hosts. And my friend Jeff Fergie told me, if you just persist, you can prevail. And we have pretty much gotten the Oxalis out of our yards. I also spot sheet mulch like Kelly does. Like if I find I have an area that's hard to manage, I spot sheet mulch. And another tip is to pull Oxalis as soon as you can recognize that that's what it is. Don't let it grow up to make its corms. You want to catch it early. Dr. Tallamy, I have a question for you. So a couple of garden tour hosts have told me that they have seen native bees sleeping under the dried heads of yarrow flowers. And ever since then, I have not been able to deadhead, though I don't get out early in the morning myself enough to see that. But I'm wondering, should we be leaving our dried plants and dried seeds? So are things growing in them, and should we be leaving them for some period of time? And if so, how long?
I leave them for the birds. Those are the seeds that the birds that don't go to your feeder depend on. A lot of our sparrows and a number of ground birds do not go to feeders. Their eating the seeds from the flowering plants that we have. So that's, to me, that's the primary reason. You know, bees do sleep when they don't get back to their nest or their hive at the end of the day. They'll just hang out where they are. So there's nothing special about the head, the flower head that's going to allow it to sleep. It can sleep anywhere. But the primary reason, as far as I'm concerned, is it's a source of seed for those birds.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I also leave mine up. Let's see here. Let's see here.
Kathy, while you're looking at another question, I'll throw out that because I've had some physical problems this spring and I haven't been able to get out and do the tidying up and the cleanup that I normally do in anticipation of spring. I spent a lot more time sitting at my desk looking out my window this spring, and some of the things that I didn't get tidied up, the old seed heads from last year and the old flower petals from last year, I watched the hummingbird come and take it day after day to build their nest. And I thought, wow, this is the first year I left that there, and it got used every day this spring. So that will definitely pull me back from being so tidy this time next year.
Okay. I have a quick question for Stefanie. How old is your garden?
Just short of 5 years, 4.5 years.
Okay. And Dr. Tallamy, somebody asked about buying ladybugs.
No. Those ladybugs are collected from who knows where and shipped to you. A lot of them are collected during estivation aggregation. So the ladybugs will go to the top of mountains. I know Kitt Peak in Arizona is a wonderful place, and they go and they bag them all up, then they ship them to you. And the first thing the ladybug wants to do when it wakes up is fly 20 miles because it doesn't know that it was just shipped to your garden. If you build a balanced trophic level in your garden trophic system, the ladybugs will come. You don't need to buy them.
Yeah. I had a question, Dr. Tallamy. What is the source of your data, basically the butterfly and moth species numbers in the charts that I have on the website? Can you just tell people where that data came from? And are they specific to California and the Bay Area?
It comes from literature from all over the country. There were 4,000 references that made those charts. So a lot of them are very old literature, 100 years old of host records. And that's why it took my lab helper 2 years to make that chart. So there's a lot of work.
Okay.
Plus, personal records.
I think it's about time for us to wrap this up. I'm sorry, Glenn, we didn't get much time with you, but I'm going to just go from side to side and say, any last words that you'd like to say before we end this panel, Dr. Tallamy?
I heard very quickly something I hadn't heard before, and that is that your live oaks that retain their green leaves actually can form a good buffer from those flying embers when you get a fire. I'd always worried about recommending plants around your house, but I heard, well, that actually protects your house from those flying embers. I hope that's true because I was excited to hear that.
Okay, good. Bob?
I'll just put in a word for a good word for the willows. If you look at the species, butterfly species list, they're actually above the oaks. So anytime you can get a willow in your yard, go for that, a native willow.
Okay, Kelly?
Well, I'd say don't wait. Time is passing either way. And I think we've all sat around for a year and thought, oh, I'll do it next time. Do it now. There's never been a better time to make change.
Okay, and Glenn?
I would encourage people to think about their garden from the point of view of two questions. The first is places for people. So that's paths, vegetable garden, clothesline, that kind of thing. And then the other question is places for other creatures. So the places you don't need for yourself, give those to the other creatures and look at the other creatures from the point of view of plant communities. So do you have a woodland plant community? Do you have a meadowland plant community? Do you have a streamside plant community? And then collect local native plants and rebuild those plant communities. The Bay Area is many, many different plant communities. And so I think on your website there is a list that I've put together from my experience of tried and true local native plants for the bayside, the fog side, and for inland, and they're tried and true. So think about plant communities and rebuilding plant communities.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I want to say we didn't have much time with Glen today, but I'll be talking a little bit later about the Skyline Gardens Alliance. If you'd like to be able to chat with Glen more and can commit to volunteering with them, you'll have the opportunity to weed and rub shoulders with both Glen and Bob. I'd like to say at this moment, thank you and goodbye to our panel. I want to thank especially Doug Tallamy for joining us today. So stick around. We're going to be visiting Bob Sorenson's garden next, but I want to thank you panelists for helping us out.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Kathy.
Bye-bye.